and welcome to the Argyle CFO Summit. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsors: Workiva, Appzen, HighRadius, TripActions, Coupa, Divvy, and Vertex. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on Twitter at ArgyleExecForum. Also be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would also like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we have received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the sessions today, and we truly appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Anna Gomez, Global Chief Financial Officer and Partner at Mischief USA and No Fixed Address. We're excited to have Anna with us for her opening keynote titled The Role of the CFO in Changing Times. Welcome, Anna, and over to you.
Thank you for having me, Brittany, and hi, everybody. Just a brief introduction on myself. It's great to be here. My name is Anna Gomez, and I'm the Global CFO and Partner of a group of agencies headed by No Fixed Address in Mischief. I started there recently in March 2022. Before that, I was CFO of the Leo Burnett Group of Agencies, which is a group of advertising agencies under the Publicis Group umbrella. I have over 20 years of experience in different industries. I had a plan to experience every industry before I found my family and home at Leo Burnett. I was there for 17 years, started out as an associate director and worked my way to become CFO. I left after building a team of over 120 finance people that was focused on succession planning and diversity. I left because I wanted to impact a smaller company, to rebuild and reconnect with my skills and enjoy and apply what I've learned in a smaller agency and a smaller company after 17 years. Next slide, please. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what the role of the CFO is in this new world. I mean, who would have known that we would be living in a world that has changed significantly? Hold on a second, sorry. Who would have known that we would have to find a new way of working together for 2 years while we were experiencing COVID in the pandemic? Or who would have even imagined that I would be starting a new job in this new remote environment? So we all thought that the pandemic would last only a few months. We packed up our things and went home and thought we would be returning to the office in a short period of time. I mean, you know, funny story, I even left all my stuff there, even my shoes that I would wear after taking the train downtown Chicago, just thinking that this would be a short-term thing, and it ended up being 2 years. Offices were emptied out, you know, homes and personal lives were kind of combined, and at first, we really didn't know what to do. We were constantly trying to adapt to a virtual world where we were trying to show our employees and our teams that we were there for them. And, you know, after 2 years, we eventually found a groove. And now that we're trying to get back to some sense of normalcy, we're trying to find a middle ground, but we find that there's really no solid line between work life and home life after we've been staying at home for nearly 2 years, or over 2 years, I would say. So we're stepping into this new world. It's kind of a post-pandemic world, but I don't want to say that it's completely over, but we're walking into this new world. And how many of you have noticed how changed it is when we walk into the office? What do you notice first? For those of you who've returned to the office, are you seeing a lot of empty spaces? Do you even know when your team comes in? Who comes in on Tuesdays or Thursdays, or both Tuesdays and Thursdays? How are we managing through a, non-mandate of asking people to try to come in, asking people not to come in, or allowing people to choose on their own? And for people that live in Chicago or that work in Chicago, as you know, it's still a little bit empty these days. Offices are kind of empty or half full. Difficult to even find cabs around the area at some point. And then office services and teams are experiencing really a huge decline in their business. You walk in and you see, whether you see your team physically or virtually, that your team is also different. Their team's priorities have changed too. Next slide, please. Sorry. Next slide. So their priorities have changed. I mean, how many of our employees don't even want to come to the office anymore, or want to come once or twice a week? How many have left? How many of our employees or teams have started remotely? How many people haven't you even met yet in person? So in my case, I walked into a new job in March 2022, and I was looking at a team with very different skill sets. From a human perspective, we all lost someone or something during COVID, and our goals have changed to include an appreciation of life and of time that we never really had, or that never really gave to ourselves and our loved ones. The younger generation of workers are now coming in, and they're used to virtual connections and contact instead of, the old office water cooler conversations, banter, and relationships that we know to have existed before the pandemic. But the younger generation and the current generation they also are very high performers when they want to be. So we're trying to mix the priorities and nuances of now this new world where we're coming in and we're in a hybrid, virtual versus physically in the office. The workforce generation now also have choices to make, and they are very adamant about their choices. So, and if you're like me and you're starting a new job in this post-pandemic or new world, even your onboarding is different. You have to work really hard to start over and establish the trust and transparency that you had when we were all in the office working together. And now we have to establish that relationship again with our peers, with our coworkers, direct reports, and even our leaders. Next slide, please. Your environment is also different. There's so much uncertainty around you, and these are outside factors that affect your business. You have reduced scopes and client budgets, or the ongoing European crisis and conflict. We have supply chain shortages. We have a lot of consumer uncertainty related to the upcoming recession that we're all hearing about. And then banks and tax authorities and regulatory agencies are now also concerned about the future. So there's a little bit of stringent spending on that side as well. So uncertainties are new normal, and we're trying to find a way to navigate through things we know and things especially that we don't know. And clients are reacting by pulling their budgets and tightening their belts. And then the banks and agencies are also reacting by demanding that we as a company assure them that we are maintaining the adequate liquidity. Next slide, please. So our priorities have changed, right? So when you're looking at your product, your profit, your priorities have basically changed to your people. People become more important now in a work environment. Work is more personal. We've had insight into our people's lives, needs, dreams, and priorities. Talent has become difficult to retain because the workforce is now mobile, nimble, and adaptable, which blows out the norm of the old corporate days. So we're now maneuvering through a generation that works to live, which in a lot of ways is a good thing. This morning I woke up and I was looking through LinkedIn, and I found this quote by a prominent guy in the advertising world. And he said that the goal these days is not to make billions, but to wake up happy. And there's a lot of truth in that. Next slide, please. So the CFO's role in the past has been a lot of tactical as well as compliance, right? So in the past, we were looking at our GL and our accounting. We had a lot of compliance related to that. We were looking into treasury, financial reporting, financial planning and analysis, pricing, and some client finance work, operations, and some production, which is related to my industry. Right now, what we have is all that we had in the past, plus new things that have been added. We're now looking at mergers and acquisitions. We are also in charge of working with leadership and setting up your financial and corporate growth strategy and goals. We're also a little bit involved in HR because we have a lot of D&I reporting that's required. We're also looking a lot at the workforce that's constantly changing and capacity utilization. IT and data security have been a very prominent topic in discussions as well as client negotiations and working with procurement. Our role is continually evolving. So we're going from transactional and compliance to basically strategic. We're now the partners of leadership. We are a partner in the business, and we strive to bring finance at the forefront of all business transactions. So, we are also in charge of dealing with people issues and leadership, and working with leadership to make sure that we have a solid strategy for growth, which sometimes growth involves acquisitions. So we are trying to buy companies that have different capabilities or have supplemental service, and that's where we come heavy into the M&A field. We're also in people management, as I mentioned. We have a lot of metrics and reporting in conjunction with our human resource function. Data security, as I mentioned, is also a big thing with business continuity planning. And we also have a hand in advising how we handle PII, which is personal identifiable information. And then last but not least, but takes a lot of our time, we're now also in meetings with procurement. We also have a role in negotiating best prices and terms. So our role has just evolved into something that is much more robust than we've ever imagined, especially in these uncertain times. Next slide, please. So how do we start looking at things from a different lens now? There are companies that have experienced rapid growth during the COVID period. And some of them are carrying over from when they were a smaller company and building out into a bigger company. We begin also by looking at what is the company's vision and focus. And if we are going to look at growth, how are we looking at pipeline and organic growth? And should we be shifting our focus to profit in a time where there's so much uncertainty? We look at what is our current company situation. You look at your team and the people that you have to help you with your vision. And then what is the conversion rate on your pipeline, because it always comes down to the financials and the finances. What is your conversion rate on a pipeline? What is your organic growth rate? And then if you're unsure about growth, or if growth will be static for the next year, should you shift your focus now to obviously looking at making a profit? Next slide, please. First thing I would do, or you should do, is look at your finance team and build a team that works. You have to secure your teams, make them feel valued, assess the backgrounds and skills that they have, and ensure that they're ready to take on more robust roles, because the CFO's role has grown, the finance team role grows in proportion to that. Most important, because we're always focused on our people, is to benchmark industry salaries and ensure that you have a highly regarded reward and retention program. Now, what happens when you can't financially afford to increase salaries or allow a duplication while you're swapping out a team? What you do then, the best thing to do is then we should always set targets and goals that are concise, measurable, and that add a growth factor to the professional development of your people. And then sometimes you let them go and you'll be surprised by what they can do when you offer them more leeway to kind of empower them to do more in your team. And then in the next few months, you start to allocate a budget, either in the next few months or in the coming year, that allows you to basically assess the skills that you need and then swap out your team or hire more people. Next slide, please. It's also important to keep the company culture and establish trust. So you're walking into an empty office, or you're walking into an office with different amounts of people, different members of your team on certain days of the week. You have to make sure that the company culture is kept and that you are able to establish trust among the people that are currently in your office, either virtually or physically. You know, you remember what are the great things about your company's culture before we all had to stay home. You know, there was the teamwork that you had, the transparency that you had with your team and with everybody across the company. And then there's also some fun events and gatherings. Most importantly, I think, is that you have to be honest with the teams and the company about your vision, and so that you can rally everybody behind you. So gone are the days when you can walk down the halls and overhear conversations or meetings that provide you with context about the business. Most of your interaction right now is still virtual, at least half of your interaction. And obviously what you don't know, what people don't know, they don't know. Oversharing is still a thing right now. It was a thing 2 years ago when we started our virtual lives, and it still is a thing until we can get some semblance of trust and partnership and transparency across. So for example, here in keeping the company culture too, in my old company, we were mailing items to people's homes to remind them of who we were, you know, masks with our company logo, notebooks, you know, fun things to remind people. And granted, I'm in advertising, so it's a really different world, but it's a reminder of people that you have a company culture and that you're still there for them and that you are a solid team, whether you're virtual or in person. Next slide, please. So finance in the new environment, I guess, is really changed. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much regulatory and client stringent reporting that is required. Sometimes in this new virtual world, we find that our systems are outdated. Vendors continue to need to be paid, so their terms remain short, while a lot of our clients' terms are actually getting longer. We are now scrutinized for our internal controls. There are large companies that actually get involved into how we are controlling our internal processes. There's a lot of benchmarking going on now because of the uncertainty that's going on. We have to benchmark our salaries, benchmark where our people are at, and also our trends in the industry. There's diversity reporting that's required. Forecasting models are first and foremost in everybody's mind, because we're trying to figure out where are we going to be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. System security is also a big part of the CFO's role and finance team's role. And then the evolution of the workplace calls for us to be able to assess and report on capacity utilization and our people's billability, depending on the kind of service or industry you're in. Uncertainty makes it difficult for us to receive, more cooperation or more leniency from our banks and to get funding. Stringent client reporting is just something now that's a given in these uncertain times. Sometimes our processes start to become inefficient because we're working in this new hybrid type of model. And then management, it's constantly on you, requiring forecasting models to stay ahead of the changing environment. In order to stay ahead, we need to be reporting our sales reports daily. We need to be projecting our sales and our profit margins. Everybody's coming to us for some kind of assurance that we're going to be able to survive, the next 12 months. Next slide, please. So that's where data comes in. So data, automation, technology, all that comes in when we're trying to weather through these times, and when we're trying to step into a role that is much bigger than what we expected or what we normally would or had in the past. Data informs your past, present, and future. It's the key element to help assess your current situation and predict your future. So that's the importance of data, of technology, and automation. Next slide, please. When we start to focus on data, so the first step would be, really is to start focusing on the data that you can provide, and the data that your team and you can provide to leadership, to management, and to the rest of the company. Data should be providing the current and future trends. It should be providing good solutions. Also should be used to obtain metrics for hiring and profit, conversion rates. And then there are employee timesheets and milestones, depending on the industry that you're in, helps with resource management and cost management as well. Data provides the everyday narrative of the company. It doesn't lie. It basically informs us and allows us to plan. So we have to ensure our team has the right tools and capacity to run the reports and analyze them to inform us of our current financial situation. Again, as I mentioned, very important to me these days are the metrics for profit and for hiring. Employee timesheets help inform your capacity utilization and billability. Again, depending on the industry you are. I'm talking from a service industry point of view because I'm in a service industry. And then resource management also keeps hiring at an acceptable level. And then obviously, first and foremost, number one, is cost management. Data provides that as well. It helps you to manage your costs, to bring them down to an acceptable level that's acceptable to leadership, to the company as a whole. Next slide, please. When you know that you have the appropriate data, you can now focus on your policies and procedures, because compliance becomes a priority when you are in uncertain times and reporting to banks and outside parties. You have to have the ability to forecast and predict your status, whether it's 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 or 12 months out. You need to be able to manage your cash flow, have some kind of process, a tight process that manages your tax liabilities and your reporting, as well as your expense reimbursement policy and credit card usage. I've worked for bigger companies where the credit card policy was different from what it is in a smaller company. A PO process. Everybody needs to have this. PO process is very important for us to manage our costs. And the systems and approval workflows are important. Banks and outside parties are looking at your internal controls and how your approval workflows go within the company. And then again, as I mentioned, data and security policies. Policies and procedures for us ensure that the business is running smoothly despite all the external economic factors. It differs in every company because you don't want a smaller company to be saddled with big company processes. So you're going to have to assess what works to ensure compliance in whatever size industry or company you're in. For example, an important thing are approval workflows. The approval workflows in a large company don't necessarily apply to the approval workflows where there's only 5 or 10 people, and the controller is also the finance manager. So you have to be able to assess that on your own. So for example, I worked at a company that went from $5 million revenue to $50 million in 2 years, from 10 people to like 180 people. So what worked for a $5 million company is probably shoddy at best and uncontrolled for a company that is now producing 50 million in revenue. So what I did is, before even thinking of changing their systems, which obviously was the system that handled $5 million in revenue, we looked at the finance team, gave them their goals, and then initiated policies and processes that assured me that at least we were protected from financial risk while we assessed everything else that was going on around us. Next slide, please. So the conclusion here is that digital transformation is really a long-range game. It really requires a thorough assessment of your workflow and reporting needs. Your policies and procedures have to be solidly in place. You have to have the right people. And then you shift your focus to automation and technology, and making sure that there is an integration of all your workflows and life cycles. So you don't necessarily have to change your systems until you have made a thorough assessment of your company's workflow and reporting needs. You have to make sure all your policies and procedures are working well, and that the system, whatever system you choose, integrates everything from sales and pipeline reporting to your expense reimbursement system to your credit card process, your PO and billing, everything should be integrated into whatever ERP system you choose. And automation should be the goal. So at a time where there's uncertainty or you don't have the budget for this big long range transformation, you can use the ability to have short-term contracts with different providers that will help you to automate certain processes that you feel are at a financial risk before you make the big decision to go through an entire digital transformation for your company. It's also important to spend about probably 6 months to a year interviewing and investigating various systems and capabilities and making sure that everything aligns and integrates and connects well, so that all the workflows and life cycles within your company are captured within just one system, one or two at the most system. Next slide, please. So last but not the least, what's next for us in these uncertain times as we go through and look forward, close the year end for 2022 and look forward to the year 2023. We must continue to evolve our workforce and invest in good talent. Because of the looming recession and economic uncertainty, we have to ride the wave by keeping your team engaged and focused, making sure your sales team is incentivized and cutting your costs, making sure that your spend is low. You have to hold hands with leadership and agree with them on next year's investments and align on the impact that will have on your finances. Partner with your leadership and company leaders, CEOs, presidents to provide your data and financial strategy. Use this data to use for metrics to gauge the company's financial success. And also avoid financial risk by implementing controls and workflows that are sufficient for your company to exist. And then accurate and reliable data is most important. That will help inform and predict where you are in the next 12 months, 3, 6, 9, or 12, whatever short-term, long-term period you guys are used to forecasting. I'm really stressing the importance of this because I'm currently seeing this with our banks. I also am involved in foreign exchange and global economies at this in this new job, and foreign exchange and hedging, and the ability to use whatever data we have to predict where we will be is super important. This is nothing new. This is everything that all of us know at this point. But when you're looking at your long-term growth, you have to assess where your focus will be. If your growth is going to be static for next year, then I suggest that the focus be on strong cost management. That's all I have. So I'm going to open it up to any questions, and I'm going to ask Brittany to just manage that for us. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna, for such an insightful presentation. We had quite a few questions come through. Looks like we have time to answer at least 2 of them. This first question was asking, do you think a company can succeed for the long term with a fully remote policy?
A loaded question. I think it depends on the company, honestly. I am of the generation where I, succeeded in my career through, obviously networking and physical, being in an office physically. This is something new for me, but my answer basically is I do think it can. It depends on managing expectations of your people, of your leaders, and being able to find a happy medium of working remotely together. I come from the creative field, and in advertising, creatives can come from anywhere in the world. Creative concepting and the creation of something can come from anywhere in the world. So I'm not opposed to it. I think it depends on the industry or the business.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have time for one last question. What key metrics do you look at from a month-to-month standpoint?
From a month-to-month standpoint, we look at client profitability, which is a direct margin type of calculation, as well as your direct labor percentage of revenue. That's very important for me, because it kind of assesses where you are. We have some metrics that we follow. In our industry, it's about 55 to 60%. And so we gauge that and we follow that to make sure that we are able to deliver a healthy profit and put the profit back into taking care of our people.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, that is all the time we have for questions, but thank you again, Anna, so much for such an insightful presentation. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you again, Anna.